You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the original series episode, This Side of Paradise. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have more of your listener feedback. And remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on X, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you. And another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy is The Secrets of Stargate, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Stargate. And if you start watching now, you're going to catch up to all of their Stargate Atlantis episodes that have just begun. So that's really cool. All right, but this time we're talking about This Side of Paradise. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
This week we have an episode from March of 1967, and we get a head start on the Summer of Love that would begin later that year. The Enterprise goes to a planet where they're expecting to find a dead agricultural colony because all the colonists should have been killed by deadly Berthold rays. But when they get there, they find the colonists are all perfectly healthy and perfectly happy. In fact, they become a bunch of space hippie flower children. Literally, because there are weird flowers on the planet that shoot them with spores that make them immune to the Berthold rays and give them perfect health and happiness. But Kirk is a party pooper, and he has orders from Starfleet to evacuate them all. But they very politely tell him the equivalent of the 1960s phrase, "Hell no, we won't go." They also start getting the Enterprise crew members high, and they start to beam up the weird flowers to the ship. And the Enterprise crew starts beaming down to join the space hippie commune. Eventually, only Kirk is left. He doesn't know why he's immune, but he eventually figures it out. Strong emotions like anger, sadness, or for Kirk, just being a jerk, destroy the spores. So he beams up Spock and makes him fighting mad. Then the two of them rig up a subsonic transmitter to make everyone down on the planet feel irritable and get into fistfights. And so the day is saved and everyone goes back to being miserable. Hooray! The end.
Hey, man, you don't harsh my buzz.
Yeah.
Father Cory, what'd you think of this one?
This one wasn't too bad. This was kind of a little bit silly, kind of fun. Spock gets the girl. It was all right. Yeah, I mean the flowers were kind of interesting, and the fact that basically they create a giant commune. Yeah, space hippie is a good way to put it.
Jimmy, how about you?
It's okay. It's not my favorite episode. I understand why it's highly regarded. I mean, okay, so for one thing, DC Fontana did an extensive rewrite on it, and she was a good writer. And this does break out of the mold of a lot of original series plots, and it's the one where Spock does get to feel emotion and does get to, get the girl and things like that. And so it's an interesting exploration of his character in particular. And there were a lot of fans when the original series were on the air who found, female fans who found Spock very attractive. And part of it was A, he's a fictional character, but B, he's emotionally unavailable. And this reveals that below that cold emotional exterior, if you're a female fan who has a crush on Spock, there's hope for you. So this was always popular with the female fans in particular because of what it did with Spock.
I like this one. I mean, like I said, it's not the best one, but it was always fun to see Spock. In the original series, Spock kind of break out of the mold and do something a little different. There were some funny moments. When you're a kid, when I'm first seeing this, watching Spock talk back to Kirk, that was kind of funny.
Why didn't you come, Mr. Spock? I didn't want to, Jim.
I didn't want to, man.
Yeah.
there's a bit of a message in this one, which is that, and we get it at the end. It's a little ham-fisted. There is no utopia in this world. You have to work hard for everything you get.
It's totally ham-fisted at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's funny how Kirk is literally the man, don't buckle to the man, and he is in this one, the man.
Yep.
So
literally to the point he's the only one up on the Enterprise at one point.
You mentioned, Jimmy, how DC Fontana did a rewrite on this one because originally this focused on Sulu.
Mm-hmm.
Sulu, this would have started with Sulu having an incurable disease that the spores cured him of as he fell in love with Layla, forget what but who was supposed to be Hawaiian.
Layla. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the name is clearly Hawaiian name.
Layla Kalomi is a very Hawaiian name, and for a very Nordic-looking woman.
Yeah, Nordic was the word. But yeah, Roddenberry didn't like it and wanted DC Fontana to rewrite it and offered her, if you do a good job, I'll make you editor on the series, which
script editor.
Yeah, big deal. And she decided this would be better as a Spock love story. And apparently Nimoy at first
it totally is. It totally is so much better for Spock than we've seen Sulu happy possessed before.
Right, with a plant. But yeah, and Nimoy at first didn't go for it. It's like, this is too soon. So we just met Spock. Like now we're undoing all that. But he really got on board with it as he read it, and I think in that sense it is a successful story.
Well, it really explains, of course, the people who are watching this wouldn't have seen the cage, but it really explains why Spock was so much different in the cage, because he does have those emotions. He just wasn't as in control of them then,
right?
And of course, Strange New Worlds is going to kind of playing with that and teasing out with that now.
Yeah,
but back in the 60s when this was airing, that wasn't such the case.
And this is clearly one of the stories from the original series that cannot be reconciled with Strange New Worlds. It just can't. Like, first time falling in love, Christine, first time I've ever been happy. Clearly we've seen Spock happy, with expressing emotions happy. So, you just have to headcanon it and go, just wave it away and just move on.
That's a question I actually wrote down. Oh, so Layla and Spock met each other 6 years previously on Earth. That sounds like Strange New World time frame. Could be sooner.
So they, based on when this episode is set, they would have met in 2261, which is the same year as Roger Corby's last transmission. Mm-hmm. And seasons 1 and 2 of Strange New Worlds were 2259, just 2 years earlier. And they're starting to they're going to be introducing Roger Corby this now in the 3rd season of Strange New Worlds. So we could well see Layla Kalami in the next 2-3 seasons. Yeah.
Now that would be interesting, given the Spock Christine dynamic in Strange New Worlds. It would be interesting to see that come up, and to see. Again, how they reconcile it. It's going to be tricky to reconcile.
And as watching this from someone who I've said multiple times, this is my first watch through TOS. I've never actually sat down and watched TOS, but I've seen all the other series through more or less. And the idea of Vulcans can't lie. It's like, well, let's see. He lies about not having emotions. He lies about this being his first love.
Lie their socks off all the time.
Yeah, or excuse me, not Vulcans, Vulcanians. I always get a kick out of that.
By the way, one thing to note that and if you study the background material on the original series, they were coming up with these scripts episode by episode. They didn't like pre-plan an entire season the way we do now. And one of the things that they had a problem with was people would come up with an idea and then it would be like, yeah, but we did essentially that a few episodes ago. Mm-hmm. And that would lead them to have to like bend things in a new direction. It's like we just used that technique to solve the problem 3 episodes ago. Can we come up with another way to do it? And so this was a constant problem in the original series, is you didn't have a writing team like a lot of shows do today. These were over the transom submissions. They were trying to get filmable scripts in time to meet their shooting deadlines. Well, okay, I think this one kind of falls afoul of that problem, because here we have a community of happy people we've got to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we did that was Return of the Archons.
Mhm.
So Return of the Archons was episode 21 of the first season. This is episode 24 of the first season. So we watched them destroy the Happy Society in Return of the Archons, and now 3 weeks later, they're back with another Happy Society to destroy.
Right.
But in this case, I've got even greater moral questions about them destroying the Happy Society, because they're not under, I mean, they are under an influence, but it's not mind control. And the way it was in Return of the Archons.
And it's more of a benevolent. It's a benevolent influence. I mean, the spores help them. Symbiotic, yeah.
Yeah. I think just automatically assuming we need to end these people's happiness, and which also has given them perfect health, and even they've regrown organs that they had removed and things like that. It doesn't look to me like this is a necessarily non-consensual relationship here. Unless in real life, if you got orders from Starfleet saying evacuate all those people, you need to go back to Starfleet. You can't just enforce those orders because the people are here. There's a special circumstance. You need to talk about this. They're not in danger from the Berthold rays like you thought they were. And therefore, you've got to reevaluate what you're going to do with these people, and they should get a say in that.
You could argue, though, that it is not entirely consensual because Spock, it's forced on him, and he does something that is out of his character. He doesn't want to do this in the beginning, and when given the chance, he rejects it. And other characters are the same way.
Agreed, but I don't think we can assume everybody is in that would agree with that.
Yeah,
I can imagine
Layla isn't.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of those people, including crew members of the Enterprise, saying, "I want to go back to the health and happiness thing."
Right, and they're not in danger because the Berthold radiation isn't going to hurt them.
And I don't mind working a farm and just having the simple life,
Amish lifestyle.
Yeah,
yeah.
They do kind of address the issue of contacting Starfleet because Uhura, when she's under control of them, disables basically short circuits the longest communications. So they would have to fix the communications first, and apparently Kirk doesn't know how to do that. So which understandable.
Yeah. At the end, to try to make it seem like the Federation is the good guys, they have McCoy and the colony leader, Elias Sandoval, basically get in a scuffle with each other. And because they've got the subsonic thing that's making them feel irritable. And that's true. Subsonic sounds can make people feel irritable and so forth. So that's actually okay. But they, Sandoval is talking to McCoy, and the two of them are getting on each other's nerves, and they start in a scuffle, and that's what cures both of them. But Sandoval says, "Oh, it's all wasted. We've done nothing here. No progress, no accomplishments. 3 years we've wasted here." And I'm going, dude, you've been running a colony and surviving.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels, that bit of the writing feels forced.
It feels like the only acceptable kind of existence is one in which progress and build and industry and that sort of thing.
Well, and they built the actual colony with all the buildings and everything. Those buildings weren't there. It just happens to look like a typical Green Acres farm, but
they say it's an agricultural colony, but they're only growing enough for themselves. Again, it's like it's a sort of an economic argument for progress. The sense of, well, they're not growing enough to sell and to feed the rest of the Federation, and that sort of thing. And I could see that argument from a 1960s viewpoint as being convincing. The sort of those hippies, they just want to live in their communes and grow enough for themselves. But we're out here working hard to grow America and to build the economy.
Yeah, and I'm all in favor of growing the economy, but I'm also in favor of it being voluntary. If you want to start a commune and just be self-sufficient and not do much more than be self-sufficient, then to my mind, that's your prerogative. You shouldn't feel like a failure for that. If you're growing your own food and working the land and building your colony and you got all your wants, taken care of, then good for you,
You know what this did remind me of, though, Jimmy, was our episode of Mysterious World on mind control parasites, because that's essentially a little bit what we have here.
Yeah, this is a mind control symbiote.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. They're not making them, climb to the top of grass stalks to be eaten by birds like the mind controlled ants, but along those lines.
The one thing apparently, so given what we see in this, so there are a couple of scientific problems with what we see in this. Just prescinding from the fact, how would spores even do this? They apparently need a fairly narrow emotional range because Kirk and Spock and the others we see falling out of grace with the spores are not in that extreme a situation, and so I'm thinking first time a woman gives birth, she's gonna fall out of union with the spores. There are various life events that would cause a disruption, but then I guess you could just get yourself reinfected.
Yep.
But we got a really weird evolutionary situation here because the spores have cured the humans, but they didn't cure all the animals that they brought with them. And there's a line where Kirk is confronting Sandoval about this, and he says, but all your animals died. And Sandoval says, we're vegetarians. And Kirk could have followed up with, well, you sure are now. What I'm interested in is, why did your animals die? This is before the whole spore reveal. So wait, this plant has evolved a symbiotic relationship with humans only? And it's only just encountered humans?
Sentient anyway,
that doesn't make any sense. It should infect everything in the environment, and you should have spored out cows and pigs and dogs and chickens and stuff.
Yep.
Which would be much more realistic from an evolutionary perspective. You don't get two species symbiosis evolutionarily unless the two species evolve together. And so if this thing clearly didn't evolve with humans, and so it should have a much broader effect.
Right. And the whole thing with the Berthold radiation thing, so they didn't know that there was this radiation when they left Earth 3 or 4 years previously, but it was discovered at some point after, and and then waited to go get them? It was a weird premise.
Well, it could be that they only just discovered Berthold rays, or only just. It's clear Berthold rays are a recent discovery. Yep. And they didn't know how dangerous they were at first, too, if I remember the dialogue correctly. But it could be they only just discovered that that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
You might have known Berthold rays are dangerous and not realized, oh, this planet is a Berthold ray hotspot.
Right.
They could have just figured that out. On the other hand, they've had an unexplained absence of communication for 3 years, but that doesn't seem to be unusual in this period of Federation history. Right. They seem to have unexplained absences of communication for lengthy periods on other occasions, too.
Right.
Another problem is they don't apparently have human life science sensors on the Enterprise right now, or that aren't working. Because
it's the Berthold rays.
Oh, that's right, of course. But one of the funny parts was when they're down there and they're mourning all these people are dead, but they left behind their buildings. Sort of the neutron bomb of space rays.
Yep.
And then Sandoval walks up and McCoy says, was it on pure speculation, just an educated guess, I'd say that man is alive.
Yeah. That's a good line for McCoy. Yeah.
McCoy's always got the good sarcastic line. And then speaking of McCoy, one of the things I love about McCoy is when he's under the control of the plants, his accent goes further south and further and further, deep into Georgia, maybe, I think.
It does, and his grasp of the dialect deteriorates because he's talking to Kirk at one point. Kirk is the only person present And McCoy says, now all y'all got to do is relax. Okay. He says it, my memory is he says it in a way that he's using all y'all as a plural. And, but even presenting from that. So y'all is the plural form of the pronoun. It's short for you all.
Yes.
You don't use it when you're talking to one person. You use the normal pronoun, singular form of the pronoun, you. And he refers to Kirk as y'all on more than one occasion. And the only situation where you do that in real life is if you're talking to one person who's present as a representative of a larger group that is not present. So if I'm talking to my friend and I'm inviting him and his family over, I might say, y'all ought to come over tomorrow or something like that, because he's representing this larger group. But y'all is always a plural. All y'all, which I've heard some people mistake as the plural form of y'all, it's not. What it is an intensive plural. So what it does is it picks out every individual in the group. So if I say, y'all ought to come over tomorrow, I am talking about this group. But if I say all y'all ought to come over tomorrow, I'm picking out each individual in the group more specifically.
So there's not a royal form of y'all? The royal y'all?
Nope.
The royal you? No, I get a kick out of the fact that all he wanted was a mint julep.
Yeah. I love the
which
fact
is a
that
very tasty drink. So
he takes down Sandoval without spilling his mint julep. Did you notice that at the end? Like Sandoval comes at him and he's like, Sandoval's on the ground. He takes him down one-handed. He's got the mint julep still in his hand. I love that.
I was watching the Harrison Ford Fugitive movie once, and I was misting it, I was riffing it, making wisecracks at it.
Yep.
And there's a scene where Harrison Ford is in a fight with the other doctor who's the antagonist. And the other doctor punches him in the lower back and Harrison Ford just keels over. And I riffed it with, that's the problem with doctors. They know right where to give you a kidney punch.
That's true.
And I thought of that in watching this when McCoy takes him down without even spilling his mint julep.
I promise I won't dig into all of the little bit of plot holes. But one of the things you mentioned about how like the lack of animals, presumably lack of bees. Not sure how the crops are pollinating, but that
by hand.
An ecosystem cannot exist without all those animals. But there is another moment where Spock and McCoy, Kirk and McCoy banter. Like Spock has already shown his mellower side, and Kirk accuses McCoy of that. Well, you always wanted a more mellow Spock, and McCoy's like, "Well, no, I didn't. I never said that." It's kind of a funny moment that we're there. But
I was struck by a line where Spock is talking, and remember, this is written by DC Fontana, and she's female. Mm-hmm. But Spock says, talking to Layla, because he's asking her, so what's the big deal? How did you guys survive the Berthold rays? And she's being coy about that until she can get him in range of a plant. But she's being coy about that, Spock says, I've never understood the female capacity to avoid a direct answer to any question. And it's like, well, that line would not get put in a script easily today. But here it's in the DC Fontana apparently put it in.
She probably felt the same way about a lot of women. Who knows?
So Kirk rejects the paradise. He says the lack of wants or needs. He has a line where he says, "We weren't meant for that. None of us. Man stagnates if he has no ambition, no desire to be more than he is." And it seems like that's a bit of maybe messaging from the mid '60s. Like you said, the summer of love was about to start. This was a big hippies, and that their like was being rejected by more establishment folk, I guess. And there's this line.
This is totally an anti-drug thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Man's meant to work, to have ambition. It's there's a bit of a Protestant work ethic idea in it as well.
Well, it's interesting though that his he gets sprayed by the flower there on the bridge and then goes to his quarters to pack, and he pulls out a medal And it doesn't say what this metal is, but it's obviously like, metal,
valor,
equivalent,
honor,
like valor, bronze star, some equivalent thereof. And that's what, because he had earned this, what he went through, whatever sacrifice or whatever work he did to earn that medal is what breaks him out of it.
And in typical 60s fashion, they don't make a big deal out of that either.
No. Yeah, I don't think I'd always assumed it was seeing the medal that breaks him out of it. But on rewatching it, I don't think it is, because he closes the metal case. I think the metal is important to him, and so that's why he retrieves it. But then he closes the case. He goes to the transporter room. He puts his luggage on the transporter pad. So he's still planning on beaming down. And it's only when he goes to program the transporter that he breaks down and starts like, no, I can't leave. And that's the moment that breaks him out of the happiness.
Well, it seemed to me that
it is his duty that breaks him out. But I think it's the medal may have like kind of set the stage for him thinking about his duty.
That's my point. Yeah. That's my point. Is it was the medal that got him, because he starts showing emotion when looking at the medal, but he doesn't quite get all the way. But it starts that process of, wait a minute, my duty is to stay here and to save this ship.
And then maybe a little bit of the fact that he realizes when they leave the ship, the last person leaves, they can't come back.
Right.
And it's leaving the Enterprise, I think, that really is what eventually.
I mean, if only they had other forms of transportation,
like shuttlecraft. Yeah. Also, they ought to have transporter on Bluetooth. Now, I can imagine this is the 60s. They weren't thinking about Bluetooth, but dude, take a shuttle. That ship has bunches of resources on it that will help you in your flower hippie buddy colonies.
Right,
colonists.
exactly.
So,
well, they even have a line about how the ship could maintain orbit for like 2 months on automatic. It's like, you would think an automatic system, again, they're not thinking of a modern computer system that could absolutely keep that ship in orbit indefinitely until it runs out of fuel.
Yeah.
But they're not thinking of that. So there's just, the automatic's just going to maintain the orbit until the orbit decays, basically.
And if the orbit's going to decay and that thing's going to fall on your planet packing antimatter, you don't leave it in. You don't leave it in the orbit for 2 months. You shoot that thing into the sun or off into space or something.
Put it in
5 seconds after I beam down,
or in the Lagrange point or some stable, orbital point. Just leave it there. Starfleet will be around to pick it up later. So my favorite part of this episode is Kirk
taunting
Spock and trying to get him to beat him up. I like the fact that he's standing there at the transporter waiting for him, smacking a big metal bar in his hand, like, I'm going to wall up that Vulcan.
And I like how Spock, when he's being happy, he initially shrugs off all the insults Kirk is throwing at him. He doesn't take him seriously, and he keeps having to repeatedly insult Spock to get a rise out of him.
I want to read some of these insults because they're so good.
Oh, I've got the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
You mutinous, disloyal, computerized half-breed. We'll see about you deserting my ship. You're an overgrown jackrabbit, an elf with a hyperactive thyroid. What can you expect from a simpering, devil-eared freak whose father was a computer and his mother an encyclopedia? An ambassador from a planet of traitors. A Vulcan never lived who had an ounce of integrity. You're a traitor from a race of traitors, disloyal to the core, rotten like the rest of your subhuman race, a carcass full of memory banks who should be squatting on a mushroom instead of passing himself off as a man. You belong in a circus, Spock, not a starship, right next to the dog-faced boy.
Yeah.
That was a compilation. I kind of edited that together from because Spock had some funny responses like, I don't think computerized is accurate.
Yeah. He also, my mother was a teacher. My father was an ambassador.
Yeah.
Some of those would, again, it's interesting to see what he's got to say to get a rise out of Spock. Mm-hmm. And again, there are lines, there are terms in there that would not be used today easily in a script, like when he calls him a half-breed, and there are a few others, subhuman race and stuff like that. But even though a modern woke writer to use a term that we talked about over on Secrets of Doctor Who, to explain the history of that term, would really bristle at using those. They're actually justified in this case. In terms of the plot, Kirk needs to go there. He needs to use the most offensive language he can with Spock in order to break him out of that spores. And he doesn't sincerely believe any of the things he's saying. He respects Spock. He's his friend. He's trying to help him by making him as mad as possible.
Yeah, and Spock, it's clear at the end of this whole tirade that Spock understands, once he's broken out of the influence of the spores, that no, Kirk did not actually mean this.
He throws Kirk around pretty readily around this transporter room, and then Kirk says, had enough? I didn't realize what it took to get into that skin of yours. And he says, I don't know what you're so mad about anyhow. It's not every first officer who gets to beat his captain several times.
Literally.
Yeah, and he says, believe me,
I
Mr.
love the
Spock.
line. I love the line about, how you're not, something basically, that it's against the regulations to hit a fellow officer.
He points out to Kirk that striking a fellow officer is a court-martialable offense, and Kirk's response is, well, if we're both in the brig, who's going to build the transmitter we need?
Exactly. And then he does also say, believe me, it was more painful in more ways than one.
He kind of rubs his shoulder.
So that was a good scene. I did like that. And then Spock beams up Leilani or Layla, and it doesn't take as much to break her out of the influence. In fact, it makes you wonder how much of under the influence she really was. Like her actions, involved in all of this.
All it takes with her is he doesn't have to insult her or anything. He just stands there. She hugs him, and then she realizes he's not one of them anymore. And he realizes that she can't have a relationship with him now.
Right.
And it's the heartbreak of not being able to have a relationship with him that snaps her out of it.
Yeah.
And then Spock has this really interesting line. He says, if there are self-made purgatories and we all have to live in them, then something or other. But no one talks about self-made purgatories that we all have to live in. This is a line, I'm pretty sure this line is Bowdlerized for 1960s television. What DC Fontana would have written is, if there are self-made hells.
Right.
And we all have to live in them. But because of 60s sensibilities, you don't say hell in the family hour in this context.
Even if it's not in the sense of the curse word, but in the sense of the actual location.
Don't want to scandalize anyone. It's interesting that even as she's confessing her love for Spock, Layla still calls him Mr. Spock.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's become his name. Mr. is his first name in the sense. And speaking of names.
Well, yeah, I like that. They take care of the issue of, what's his, full name. You can't pronounce it.
Yes. Just like the Doctor.
Yep.
So maybe there's an old funny theory that Spock is a Time Lord, but kind of funny there. And at the end, when we have the usual standing around on the bridge, wrapping things up, McCoy says it's the second time man's been thrown out of paradise, and Kirk says this time man walked out on his own, and that's what gives me maybe we weren't meant for paradise.
This time, one man forcibly evicted all the other men.
Yeah.
It wasn't God throwing you out. It was me.
Yeah. Well, Kirk does think he's a god, so I mean.
There is that. What does God need a starship? And then we get Spock's final line about for the first time in his life he was happy, which is a bittersweet note to end on. Any other notes on this episode, Father Cory?
So just kind of interesting behind the scenes. Layla was played by Jill Ireland, she's an actress. She shows up all over the place. Very well-known actress. Was first married to David McCullum, who was, if you're familiar with NCIS, he was Ducky on NCIS. Also Avengers, I believe, was he on?
Yep, Avengers. Yeah.
And then after they're divorced, she married Charles Bronson.
That's right. Yeah. What an interesting marital path. That's interesting. How about you, Jimmy? Any other notes?
Yeah, there's one thing that's a famous image from this episode where after Spock's been infected and Kirk is being a jerk to Kirk is just a jerk to everybody in this episode, which is what protects him. But he is really
he's ticked off.
But he's looking for Spock, and he and Sulu and another crewman are marching down this path, and they see Spock in the distance hanging on a tree branch.
Mm-hmm.
And this tree branch is like it's been placed so that you could hang off of it. It's not like a natural tree branch. It's like been positioned this way. But this was an innovation by the director. When they got to the filming location, they saw it like this. And originally it was going to be Spock is like in the distance kissing Layla. And that would visually communicate to Kirk that something really strange is going on here. But instead, they've got Spock wearing the kind of work coveralls that the colonists wear, and he's hanging off of a tree branch upside down laughing. And that is like way more effective at communicating something strange is happening here than just it would be if he saw Spock kissing her in the distance. This is like, I mean, Spock climbing, hanging upside down and laughing. That is just wow, given what had been established about his character by now. It's just unmistakable. And it wasn't in the script. It was something they figured out when they got to the filming location.
Interesting. One last note about the writer of the script, Jerry Saul, was so unhappy with the rewrites that he wanted to be credited under a pseudonym, which is a thing you see writers do sometimes. They don't want to be associated with it.
But I have to say, I think he was wrong. It seems to me like DC Fontana's edits made this much better than it would have been when you read about the original plan.
Yeah, I agree.
And by the way, I have to say, throughout this whole conversation, every time we mention Layla, all I could hear is, Layla, you got me on my knees.
Eric Clapton going on there. Yeah.
Not credit to this, though. That song has nothing to do with this episode.
Yeah. Yep. All right, we have our feedback, and the feedback came in on our discussion of Star Trek Nemesis, although this first one refers to Insurrection. So let me read that. Sage Channel on YouTube writes, I feel like I'm the only person on Earth that loved Star Trek Insurrection. It really felt so much more true to Star Trek than so many other films. I think I can understand what Sage Channel is saying, which is it felt like an episode of TNG in many ways. The limited locations, the plot that's kind of wrapped up in a bow, sort of one episode story, the bad Starfleet admiral. I mean, I could see where it in that sense it did feel a lot like a TNG episode,
and it didn't have as much of the gee whiz bang CGI. Yeah, some of the other movies have.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actually true. I haven't seen like a scientific study on this, but I remember hearing years ago that if you publish something and it gets out to at least 600 people, it will be someone's favorite thing.
Yeah,
and that's actually even if other people don't like it, it'll hit the target for someone. If you can get up to that level of volume. And so I've always thought that that's really cool that, that even, stuff that I've done that like I would redo now because of how little I like it, someone probably really liked it and it really landed for them. And so if Star Trek Insurrection landed for you, that's great.
Does that mean somebody actually likes Code of Honor? I mean, apparently the author did, since she reused it as Emancipation for Stargate. But
well, it's good to know there are at least several people with it. This is their very favorite podcast, so that makes it feel good to know that. Then our next feedback comes from Eric via email, who says, first, I'd like to say that I always love to hear my feedback read and commented on my Monday afternoons. I've said this before. It's the highlight of my day, and I appreciate it. Well, this is for you, Eric. Anyway, but I do have to point out something that Jimmy said about this Star Trek movie, and I have to say, tisks, Jimmy. Jimmy made a comment that in this movie, the bridge of the Enterprise decompressed and someone was sucked out into space. Sorry, but they were actually blown out into space, a point that was made by Data in the TNG episode The Naked Now, which is ironic given that one of the overarching themes of this episode centers around Data. Anyway, still love the podcast and always look forward to those Monday afternoons when I hear my comments read, LOL. It really does make my day.
Yeah, actually, in this case, it was. I mean, I've talked about the difference between. I've talked about how explosive decompression is being blown out, not sucked out. I've even talked about repeatedly. I've mentioned that repeatedly. I've even talked about the physics of how to survive it. You know, you want to get up against as far away from the opening into space as you can, in order to minimize the amount of air that's behind you that will propel you out. However, in this case, Data was sucked out because Nagilum was out in space deliberately sucking the air out of the bridge in order to get Data.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. All right. Thank you, Eric. I hope you enjoyed your comment being read. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Father Nathan L., Andrew B., Tristram C., Nate and Jessica V., and Daniel B. Their generous tax-deductible donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. What did you think of the original series episode, This Side of Paradise? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the animated series episode, The Territon Incident.
Oh.
Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, I have never understood the female capacity to avoid a direct answer to any question, and I will hunt down anyone who sends that to my wife.